My name is Anna, and I am going to be doing a sewing tutorial on the Nia Small Crossbody Bag by AppleGreen Cottage, which is this bag right here. I got to be a tester for this bag, and I really enjoyed making it. I've actually made 8 or 10 of them, and some of my friends online had asked if I would do a tutorial so that they could maybe get into bag sewing, so that's what this is. So this bag I think is pretty great. It's a fairly small bag, but it's large enough to carry all of your essentials. So on the front it has a cell phone pocket with a nice magnetic snap closure. On the back it has a zippered pocket, so you can put sort of some essentials in there. It closes, the main compartment closes with a magnetic snap, and then it also is supposed to have a slip pocket on the inside, but I forgot on this one. I will be doing it on the one I'm sewing today. So it's got lots of pockets, and it has a crossbody strap, so I really enjoy this one. All right, so I've already got all my pieces cut out and interfaced, and so it shows how to do all of that in the pattern, so I'm not going to be showing that. So if you get the pattern, it'll give you all the pattern pieces and what to interface and all of that. I have also done most of the magnetic snap installations, but I thought I would save one to do on video so that you guys could, if you've never put a magnetic snap in before, I thought I would show you how to do it. So this has 2 magnetic snaps, one for the main compartment and one for the front zipper, front snap phone compartment. And so I've already got 3 of those installed, but I'm going to show you how to do the last one. In the pattern, it shows where to put the mark to install the snap. So if you look, this is my flap piece. It's a little ironed, but this is my flap piece, and you can see I've got a little spot, and in the pattern it says where to put that spot. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and install my magnetic snap. So if you've never done magnetic snaps before, they come with a snap piece and then a little backing piece. And what you're going to do is you're going to take the little backing piece and you're going to put it over the mark you made, and then we're going to use that to line up these little side marks. So I'm going to just take a pen and mark where my prongs are going to go through. So there you can see that. And now I'm going to take my seam ripper and I'm just going to cut those 2 little prong areas open. And then from the right side of the fabric, I'll push my magnetic snap through. And I'll put my little backer piece on. And then I'll just fold the prongs down. So that's just how you install a magnetic snap. There you go. So now I've got all my magnetic snaps installed. And if I get interrupted by kids, sorry, they're upstairs. All right. So the first thing I am going to do is sew the flap. So I'm going to take my 2 flap pieces, both my external and my lining, and I'm going to put them right sides together. And I'm going to leave the top open, but I'm going to sew around the rest of the sides. And this pattern mostly uses a 3/8 inch seam allowance. I'm just turning at each corner. And so now I've got my flap sewn together, and I need to cut off some of that excess fabric because we're going to be turning this now inside out. I like to put a little cut in at each corner. And then I'm going to just cut off some of that excess. And now I'm going to turn it inside out. I like to use waterproof canvas for my lining. It's OtterTex waterproof canvas. I like it because it doesn't need to be interfaced, and it's waterproof, so that's nice. And it's not terribly expensive. You can get it in lots of colors. But it is a little stiff. I'm just turning out those corners so they're nice and crisp. I'm just using a pen to do that. And then once I've got it, I'm just going to give it a quick press with the iron. Now I'm going to top stitch it. So I'm going to go to a slightly longer stitch length. And I'm top stitching pretty close to the edge, maybe about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Now our flap's done. So there's our flap, all top stitched. Now we're going to just put that aside for a minute. And next I'm going to work on the cell phone pocket. So the cell phone pocket actually is a long piece, and in the pattern it will show you how to fold it to create your pocket. So I've actually already got that done. I've already got my magnetic snap installed. And again, it shows you where to do that in the pattern. So I'm just going to baste along the edges to sew that together. Now my pocket is basted together. I'm going to go ahead and add on the front side pieces. front side piece and the front top piece look very similar, but the side pieces are just a little bit wider, so I know which ones they are. So we are going to attach those to the sides. And the pattern has really great pictures. I think honestly you could follow the pattern without even reading it, just by looking at the pictures, which I really like because I'm pretty visual. But I know sometimes it helps to actually see somebody do something, so I thought this might be kind of helpful to people. So I've got right sides together, my front side pieces attached to my pocket, so now I'm going to sew those on with a 3/8 seam allowance. Just back stitching a little bit. And we'll do the other side. Now that we've got our sides sewn onto the front pocket, we want to top stitch them. So you want to open up your sides and sort of smooth them out. If you're using all fabric, you could iron them, but this is like a faux leather, so I will not be ironing it. I'm just going to sort of finger press it into place. And then just going to top stitch it. It's okay to go a little bit slower and take your time when you're top stitching. Make sure your bobbin's not empty. That's always when my bobbin runs out, is when I'm top stitching. So now we have our sides on. One of the times I was making this, I completely forgot about the flap and I sewed the top on. So I sewed this piece on, and then I had to unstitch everything because I forgot about the flap. So our flap's already done. So you're going to take your flap, which already has your magnetic snap installed, and you're going to stick it onto the other magnetic snap. And you can see what your pocket's going to look like. And now I'm just going to baste this in place across the top. Make sure it's nice and straight. Now that we have our pocket attached, now we can add our top piece. So you're going to put right sides together across the top. My snap broke. My clip broke. I'm just going to trim this top a little bit so I have a nice clean seam allowance here. And then we're going to sew this together with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And now we're going to flip and top stitch that as well. I'm just going to finger press that down. I switch to a longer stitch length when I'm top stitching. Now our front side is almost done. We just have to sew on the strap connector, but first we need to make the strap connectors. So that's what we're going to do next. So I'm just going to put this aside for a moment and find my strap connectors. There they are. Those are my strap connectors. I am going to take some double-sided tape and put it down the middle of them on the back side, on the wrong side. And then I will uncover my double-sided tape and fold both sides into the middle, and the double-sided tape will hold it in place. If you don't have double-sided tape, you can just hold it in place with clips. This is convenient, and I happen to have it on hand. Now I've got each of my strap connectors folded in half, and I am going to add the 3/4 inch D-ring to them. So I'm going to put them through and fold them over so that they look like this, and I'm going to sew across the bottom now just to baste them in place. Now I'll do the next one. Same thing, I'll take my 3/4 inch D-ring, put it through, and now I'm going to baste that in place. Going to trim my threads, and then we will take one of these and we will sew it onto the front panel that we just made, and the other one we'll save for the back panel. So here is my front panel, and I am going to sew this in the top right corner. So here is my top right corner, and I'm going to sew this 3/4 of an inch in. So I'm going to measure from the edge 3/4 of an inch in, and then sew that in place. Oh, I need I need my ruler. There we go. All right. I'm just going to use a clip to hold it in place. And I'm just going to sew it on. I like to go back and forth a couple of times, simply because this is what will be holding your bag on. The light is really bright. So now I've got this sewn in place. Sorry about how bright it is. If I do this at nighttime, it's impossible to get light down here. So now we're going to put this piece aside, and I'm going to start working on the other half of the bag, which is the part that has the zipper. So the first thing I'm going to do is I need to put my zipper together. So this is a zipper jig that my dad made me. So I've got 6 inches of number 5 size zipper, and I've got a zipper pull. So I need to get the zipper pull onto my zipper. If you've never used a zipper jig, it's just a fork that is screwed to a block of wood. You could also just like stick a fork somewhere and put a brick on top of it. So, but I'm gonna take my zipper pull, slide it upside down onto the fork, so now it's held in place. I'm gonna open up my zipper, and because my zipper pull is upside down, my zipper should be upside down, and I'm going to just put the 2 pieces into the sides, and there we go. Now I'm on. Okay. So now we want to, I'm gonna just sew over my ends a little bit to sew the edges shut. Just to kind of base those closed. Do the other side too. And then I just like to hit the edges with a little bit of a lighter, just to, so that the zipper doesn't unravel. Ooh, that really liked to burn. Okay. So now my zipper is ready for me to install my zipper tabs. Let me find those. Oh no, where did my zipper tabs go? I had them up here all ready to go. Apparently I hid them from myself. So my zipper tabs, what I've done with them is I've taken them and I've folded them in half, right sides together. And now I'm going to put them over the edge of my zipper. So I'm going to take my zipper and put it inside the zipper tab. So now it's enclosing my zipper. And I'm going to sew across the edge of this with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. do the same thing on the other side. So I'll take my other zipper tab, insert my zipper into it, and sew across it with that same seam allowance. And now I'm going to take my zipper tab and open it up like this. And that light is very, very bright. I don't know how to fix that. So I'm going to open it up like that. So it was sewn on, and I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to sew fairly close here across the edge, maybe 1/8 inch from the edge. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Open up my zipper tab and sew about 1/8 inch from the edge. Now our zipper is pretty much ready to go. I'm just going to trim the edges of the zipper tab so that they are the same width as the zipper. So right now my zipper tab is just a tiny bit wider than my zipper, so I'm just going to trim that. All right, now you can see it's pretty much the same size. Oh, that light is something else. All right, now our zipper is ready to go, and we are going to start assembling our back panel. So I have the back piece. I embroidered mine, but you don't need to embroider yours. It can be just plain. So I like to baste my zipper in place. So you want to make sure that your zipper pull is off to the left. So I am going to baste my zipper in place. You don't have to do it if you want to just do the next step all in one piece, but I like to make sure that my zipper is really nice and neat, so I like to baste it. I'm just going to sew very close to the edge. My zipper is nice and neat and basted in place. We're going to add the zipper pocket lining. And so I've got my back piece right side up, my zipper right side down. And we're going to take the pocket lining and put it right side down on top of the zipper. will sew all 3 of them together, and I just like to check where my seam allowance is going to be by butting the edge of my foot up against my zipper. I'm not using a zipper foot. My machine has a pretty skinny foot, so I'm just using that. I'm just going to use my magnetic seam guide to make sure I'm keeping the same seam allowance the whole time. And now we're going to sew all 3 layers together. Just going to move my zipper out of the way. Sometimes when you sew past the zipper, it can push your foot around. So now we are going to top stitch. So we're going to flip the back piece down, do a little finger press. Again, if you're using fabric, you could iron this. And then I'm going to flip my lining down and sort of press that in place as well. And then we're going to, now our zipper is up at the top, and our back piece and my lining piece are down, so we're going to top stitch those in place. Now we're going to take our pocket piece and we're going to put it right side down. And we're going to take the lining and we're going to flip it up and line it up with the top of the zipper. So we flip this over. So we've got the front and the back. We're going to take my lining piece and we're going to fold it up to the top. And then I'm going to baste that in place. And now I'm going to take my back top piece. So this is our top piece. Man. And I am going to put that face down or right side down on top of my zipper and sew that down. just figuring out where my seam allowance is. I like to butt up right up against the zipper. Moving my zipper out of the way again. And now I'm just going to take that piece, flip it up, and top stitch here across the top. Now our back panel is almost done. We just have to sew on the strap connector, which we've already made. So same as before, I'm going to measure 3/4 of an inch in from the right side. And then I'm going to sew that in place. So now I have this sewn in place. And let me think, what's next? So our front and our back panels are done. Oh, you know what? I like to baste along the edges here to keep my pocket from moving around. So I'm going to do that. Now we're going to work on the lining. So the lining has a slip pocket. So the slip pocket piece is a long rectangle, and I've already folded it in half and pressed it. And I'm just going to sew along the edges, but leave a hole for turning. hole and start on the other half. Now we need to turn our slip pocket right side out, but before I do that, I'm just going to trim off my corners. There. I'm going to turn it right side out. And then poke out our corners so we've got a nice crisp square. And now I'm just going to hit this with the iron. And when I iron it, I'm just going to fold in that little hole, and then I'll iron across all of that. Now I'm going to top stitch across the top. The hole is in the bottom, so here's our hole. I'm going to top stitch the top. Now we need to put it onto one of our lining pieces. If I remember correctly, it goes on the lining piece that has the socket snap. So I'm going to, I'm sure there's measurements in the pattern. I'm just going to eyeball where it goes. So I'm going to sort of put it where I want it to be. And I'm actually going to tape it in place because I don't want to use pins on my waterproof canvas. And then what we're going to do after I tape it in place is we're just going to sew along the three edges, and when you sew across the bottom, that'll sew your hole closed. So I'm just going to grab some tape. And just put a little bit across the top just to hold it in place. That looks good. I sew a little triangle at the top of a pocket like this. I just find it helps the pocket stay sewn down better. Otherwise, sometimes your edges come up. to sew another little triangle in this corner. Oh, little spider, hang on. I sew in my basement, so there's spiders and sometimes crickets. Now I can take my tape off, and you can see my slip pocket is in place now. I've found this is the perfect place to slide my wallet, so I really like that slip pocket. And now I'm going to take my jacket off because it's getting warm in the basement. Now we are going to sew our two lining pieces to our exterior pieces. So let me think. Let's see. So this is our back piece that we've got, and I want my slip pocket on the back, so I'm going to sew these two together. And then I've got my front cell phone pocket, and I'm going to sew the other lining piece to that. And I'm going to sew them across the top. And the top is obviously where you have your strap connector, and the top of the lining piece is where you have your magnetic snap installed. So I'm going to sew across the top of both of these with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And then I like to just turn around and go back over that last piece because that's where the strap connector is. So I'm going to just turn it around and one more time go over the top of my strap connector. Just to make sure that piece is really nicely secure. Now I'm going to do the other side. I'm going to just trim up some of my edges so I can have nice, neat edges. And then same thing, I'm going to turn around and go back over my strap connector. And now I am going to top stitch the lining. So we're going to open these up. So open that up and we're going to top stitch here across the lining. want to go a little slow over that strap connector because that is a pretty thick spot. And then we'll do the same with the other piece. We're going to open it up, and I am going to top stitch across the top of the lining. Just going to finger press it open. All right, we are in the home stretch. So now I have two pieces. So I've got my front and my back, and I'm going to lay one on top of the other. The lining on top of the lining, the exterior on top of the exterior. I actually like to attach the lining snap on the inside, so you can see lining to lining, exterior to exterior. And now we're going to clip all the way around. I like to start here at the edge where the lining and the exterior come together and make sure that I have those, the edges of the lining lined up. Otherwise the sides of your bag will be crooked. So I do one side, and then I come over and I do the other side. And then I'm going to clip along the exterior. And flip it over, clip along the exterior again. You may find that one lining is longer than the other. So if you look, I'm sorry, one exterior piece is longer than the other. This usually happens to me. It's not a big deal. I like to trim them to be even, so I know exactly what my seam allowance is going to be. So I'm just going to trim this little extra bit off. And then I'm going to pin across the bottom there. And now I'm going to pin my lining together. So you can see I've got all my exterior pinned together. Now I'm going to pin my lining together, but I'm going to leave, when I sew this, I'm going to leave the bottom open. I'm not going to sew that part shut. So you don't need to pin that. All right. So I like to start across the top of the exterior. Oops. So here's my exterior, here's my lining. So I'm going to sew across the top here, and then I'm going to sew down. And then I'm going to sew down, continuing on through the lining, but taking a slightly larger seam allowance. I'm going to get all the way down to the bottom, and I'm going to stop, and then I'm going to cut my threads, and I'm going to come over to this side and sew up the top, taking a slightly larger seam allowance. When I get to here, I'll go back to my normal seam allowance and then back up to the top. So we're going to be sewing basically 3 edges and leaving this bottom open. I think in the pattern it calls to leave just a piece of the bottom open. Because I use thicker fabrics, I'm using faux vinyl, faux leather, and I'm using waterproof canvas. It's fairly stiff, so I like a really big turning hole. So I'm going to start with about a 3-inch seam allowance. Just going to check where my embroidery is because I don't want to sew. Actually, I'm going to flip it over like this. I don't want to sew through my embroidery. That would make me incredibly sad. We're going to turn and start going up the edge. And then I'm going to sew about maybe 3/4 of an inch down into the lining. And now I want to start taking a slightly larger seam allowance. And the reason I do this is so that when I flip the lining into the exterior, it fits. So I'm going to move my magnetic seam guide and start taking a slightly larger seam allowance, just an extra 1/8 of an inch. I'm just going to reinforce that bottom with some extra stitches since I will be flipping it or turning it inside out from there. And now I'm going to leave that whole bottom open. So I've sewn across here and down here. Now I'm going to leave the bottom open and I'm going to start here and go up the other side. Still taking that slightly larger seam allowance on the lining. And then when I get close to the top, that last inch of the lining, I want to move in to my normal seam allowance again, which is about 3/8 of an inch. And now we are going to trim our seam allowances down and we're going to flip this inside out. I like to clip off my corners. now I'm going to flip the bag inside out. So I'm going to turn you a little bit so you can see me. And so this is the bag. It's all sewn together. We've got a big hole in the bottom of the lining. So I am going to reach down in, and we're going to have to flip this whole thing inside out. So I'm going to start with my corners. I'm going to push those in. And I'm going to work from both the outside and the inside to flip this inside out. And again, because I use thicker, stiffer materials, that's why I leave that larger hole. All right, halfway there. Go. All right, now it's inside out, or I guess it's right side out. So you can see there's the whole thing. And I want to reach through and really push out the edges and corners of the exterior of the bag. This is your only chance to do it. The next step is to sew that hole in the lining closed, and once you do that, it's very hard to push out these corners. Looking pretty good. I'm just going to reach down with my little pen tool and make sure they are pushed all the way out. There, that looks pretty good. Need to make sure my zipper pocket is all smooth. Okay, so here we go. Now what we have to do is we have to sew this hole closed. So we've got this giant hole in the bottom of our lining, so we need to sew that closed. I like to measure the length of my bag and the length of my lining. The length of my bag almost always comes out to be 8 inches. So I like to make sure that my lining is about 8 inches as well, because then when I fold the bottom in and sew across the bottom, it'll be about 7.5 inches and it'll fit in very nicely. So I'm just going to go measure this real quick on my table. All right, so my lining was about 8¼ inches, so I cut off just about 1/4 inch. And now I am going to sew the bottom closed. So I'm just going to push the edges, the corners in, flip it over, and pin it in place. I've got it all clipped and I'm just going to sew across the bottom. All right, and now really all that's left to do is to push our lining down into our bag. If you use a fabric lining, this is pretty easy. With the waterproof canvas, it is a little bit harder. So what I like to do is I actually like to push this top piece in first, and I'll show you why. You're not going to behave for me today. Well, it flipped so well, it birthed so well through the hole, and now it's going to give me trouble. Well, we'll just push it down into the bag. There we go. My lining wanted to fight with me a little bit, but that's okay. You really want to get the corners of your lining pushed out really nicely to the edges. Otherwise it can get a little bit bulky in those corners. All right, I think we are good. So there's the bag. So we've got our front phone pocket, we've got our back zippered pocket, we've got our two strap connectors. When you open it, you've got your slip pocket on the inside. And now, just in case any of you don't know how to do a strap, I'm going to just quickly show you how to do a strap. So I've got 60 inches of black webbing. I'm going to just switch to my black thread real quick. Is this my new black thread? It is. My open black thread. Sewing a strap is actually pretty easy. know I set out everything ahead of time, including my black bobbin. But you think I could find it now? I think it must have rolled away on me. That's all right. We'll use this one. All right, so for your strap hardware, you will need I'm using a 1-inch strap, so I'm using 1-inch hardware. So I have 2 1-inch swivel clips or lobster claws and 1 1-inch strap slider. So I'm going to start with this. I'm going to take my strap and thread it through the strap slider. So you can see I went through it. And then I'm just going to sew this down. And I like to sew a box and then sew an X through the box. There's my box, and now I'm going to sew my X. I'm going to trim all my threads. All right, and now, I've got my strap slider connected to one side. I'm going to take the other side and put it through one of my swivel clips. All right, and then I'm going to go back through my strap slider, in one side and out the other. And now I'm going to put my other swivel clip on the other side, and I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to sew this in place with a box and an X. And that's all it is to do a strap. That's it, our strap is done. Now you have an adjustable strap. And now I'm going to take my strap, I'm going to turn away from my crazy sunlight, and I'm going to clip it onto my bag. And that's it, we're done. So that is the Nia Small Crossbody Bag by AppleGreen Cottage Patterns, and hopefully that was helpful.